Good evening. My name is Thalia Moore-Shearer, and I'm super excited to talk to four members of Ring Shout, which is a collective of Black artists who create their own music for the future. And joining me today is Sierra Hammond. She's a soprano, Dallas, Texas native with a bachelor in music and vocal performance and pedagogy from Oakwood University. She also has a master's from University of Tennessee, and she's currently serving as the chair of the executive board of Encore Opera in Huntsville. But she's also the director of vocal studies at Alabama A&M University. Can you tell me a little bit about Oakwood University's music tradition and its historical significance?
Sure. So Oakwood University is a Seventh-day Adventist HBCU in Huntsville, Alabama. And at Oakwood, there is music everywhere. It's been that way since its founding in 1896. And I always say the joke, but it's actually really true. If you walk down the center of campus and you're singing any song, whether it's gospel, pop, or anything, either somebody will harmonize with you as you're passing, or somebody will tell you that you're flat. But it's all out of fun. It's all out of fun. But there is a rich legacy, and specifically with the traveling concert choir, the Oakwood University Aeolians. It was founded in 1946 by the first Black woman to receive her PhD, Miss Eva B. Dykes. It's also the name of our library on campus, and it has just been a wonderful group that has continued through the legacy of music on Oakwood's campus. They've been crowned Choir of the World. They've gone to different competitions, the World Choir Games, receiving gold medals, and it's just been a lush musical tradition that has continued and is still going strong today. So that's just a little bit about the music tradition at Oakwood University.
That's so beautiful. I love that. I'm jealous that I didn't know about that school and that I didn't get to go there. That sounds amazing. Next, we have Eddie Charlton, who is a baritone. He has been a regular performer with Nashville Opera since 2012, and he premiered Charles Heimermann's A Symphony of Psalms in 2016. He currently regularly works as a voice actor and narrator with Nashville Public Television and speaks to various colleges. The question that I have for you is, what role do you think that you play in pushing forward the boundaries of Black musicianship?
I'm very much a gadfly. My job is to look for the people who are comfortable and sting them. So that's one of the things that I really unconsciously set out to do. And then I said, okay, I'm seeing a pattern here. So I might as well submit to it. It's obviously the thing that keeps coming up in everything I do is okay, how can I problematize what you think of as the boundaries? How can I make you realize that the walls are not in fact as solid as they appear? And you can go outside, you can go farther, you can go into areas of this that you thought were off limits. And I tend to choose gigs that end up doing that. My first engagement with Nashville Opera was Difficulty of Crossing a Field, which is about a man who disappears in plain sight in front of 8 of his slaves. And the way it's written, we know a whole lot more about why Mr. Williamson is gone than we're letting on. And it sort of frames it as our voodoo revenge on this man for his treatment of us. So I was like, yeah, this is what I want. Because I remember those very, very comfortable opera goers coming into that, and it was staged in a 3/4 round, and we would actually move in and out around them while we were performing. And it was very unnerving for them. And I was like, good. There needs to be a separation of what I call museum opera from this thing where the work is still very much alive and you're inside it. And it forces you to deal with its questions directly. There's not the comfortable separation of, oh, okay, you're on the proscenium and then there's an orchestra pit between us and I'm sitting comfortably in the orchestra seats, just being a passive consumer of this. No, it's around you and you're going to deal with it. Same way with Maria de Buenos Aires, which we did in 2018. It was staged as if we were in a tango club, in a milonga. And we were instructed to move in and out around the audience. There were special preset objects that we were to grab off the tables they were sitting at. And we could make eye contact, but we could neither speak nor smile. And if we conversed with each other, most of the time when we converse with one another, I would say, look, even if you don't understand me, I'm going to mumble to you in Spanish. And I'm mimicking the Argentinian accent, the Castellano, as much as I can. So they were like, who are all these brown people wandering around us refusing to speak English? And they're not smiling. I was like, oh, we're already on the track I like. Because there's an expectation of Black people who are hyper visible that you must always be pleasant and that you must always engage upon demand. If you harden your boundaries and refuse to do any of those things, you're viewed as dangerous. I'm like, okay, so let's sit in the dangerous space here. What does it mean not to be the safe Negro, or not to acquiesce automatically to playing that part? So that's kind of what I do, is say, okay, is everybody safe? Good, follow me over here. Everybody still safe? No? Great, we're gonna stay here for a little while. I don't know what that means, but that's what I end up doing.
That is really cool. I've never seen like live theater like that, except for Cats. But I think that would be so cool to put into more experience.
Advisory on this when I post it. It's fine. It's fine.
And then lastly, we have James Dargan. I honestly don't think there's a way to boil down your bio into like a quick little tidbit because you are so wildly accomplished. He's a baritone from Boston University, multiple degrees, spent some time in Joliet, England, did my best, speaks so many languages, violinist, just so many things that we can apply to. The question that I have for you is, how is the music that you write unique from all of the other new composers that are coming up right now?
The question is one that immediately invites an egotistical, grandiose answer, which is exactly why I enjoy answering it by saying that nothing about me is unique besides the fact that I am born of incredibly powerful, unique people. I could not have been any other than I am without, with parents like Dr. James Dargan, my father, who, feckless though he is also very accomplished, William Thomas Dargan. His father, William Thomas Dargan, his mother, Vashti Dargan, Brewer Dargan. I have to shout them out because they are what make me unique and therefore what makes my music unique. Same thing with my mom's side. Dearly departed Helen Ballard Stockard and Russell Leon Stockard Sr. With people like that at my back, my particular compositional voice, it was inevitable, and it was inevitably going to be something not in the norm of classical music, because if you grow up with Bach, Ella, Aretha, Nat King Cole, and like a swamp of jazz and spirituals and blues and lining out tradition, it's not going to sound like someone who grows up, well, in a world of whiteness. I hope that my music sounds Black. I hope that it feels Black to sing and to perform. And beyond that, I've given up hoping for any kind of like, hoping to manage the impact, because the intent is to communicate my pride in my heritage and my pride in being part of an innumerable band of amazing Black people. So what makes my music unique, I hope, is that I come from unique ancestral power.
Thank you so much for like putting it that way. I feel strong myself.
Yeah.
Why now? Why rock the boat? We're all in quarantine. Everyone has a lot of things to think about. It can also feel like there isn't really much to do other than wax poetic.
Right.
So why make large statements at this time? Let's start with Sierra.
Why now? That's a very good question. I think when people talk about justice and when people talk about inclusion and diversity and all these, I guess you could call them trigger words or anything like that, they're always talking about you need to wait for the right time, or you need to hold off, or there's somebody before you, or there's a certain way you have to do it, and you shouldn't talk about everything all at once, or else your message can get lost. And I think that has always been the response when it comes to, yes, minorities, yes, you know, people of color, but specifically to Black people. It's always a wait your turn. And I think with everything that's happening and the access to information, and we get flooded with another shooting, another rape, another murder, you know, and it's just, it gets to be too much, to where we need to have a outlet. We need to be able to express and be able to tell and to be able to alert all those around us of the injustices, of the stories, of our voices, and without having loud and present statements. And like with us, it's, we're choosing to do it through art, through music specifically. Racism has not just, you know, occurred within, you know, from the beginning of the pandemic or the beginning of quarantine till now. It's just that we're confronted with it day after day after day through social media, through the news and everything. And there's just a way we have to get it out. And until we demand justice specifically for people that look like us, then it's never going to be. And I think that's why it's important to do it now. Never let someone tell you wait after you have been oppressed to get the justice that you deserve, right? That's not their call. It's not their call to tell you how you need to live your life, how you need to demand justice, and how you need to be treated. It's not their call. And so right now we're ready to scream it from the rooftops. We demand justice. This is what's happened to us. These are our stories, and that's where we're headed.
I need to go run around the room now. Excuse me.
You agree?
Hey.
On that?
Amen. I just, you know, it's like, it's all, I wish I could say it was all of those things, but she thought of that first and she poured it into me just now. I felt some of that, yes, but also, I also just realized that I have always known that my friends are incredible. And so, and I always wondered, and I'm sure that, you know, you, Sierra, and you, Eddie, and you, Talia, have also felt this, like, when you see something else going on that is in the public eye, and it's not all that, and you're like, I know like 6, 7, you know, 80, 11 friends of mine that would do this to the moon, but somehow this person is doing it, and we're told that we are not good enough, or don't have enough degrees, or don't have enough visibility. You know, like Sierra said, you know, they tell you to wait your turn, or there are people in line ahead of you, or, you know, your time will come. And I just got to the point where I was like, you know, there is no justice in the world if people that I know are incredible are not being heard doing their incredible thing. So it's almost incidental that is literally the same trajectory that Black people as an ethnic group have traced over the millennia, because we are the people that are told, oh, your time will come as a people. And we have been incredible this whole time. So I didn't see out there, I saw tons of ensembles that were made up of all Black people, or all African diaspora, or all POC, but a lot of them stop with, oh, now we have a mic, now we can do Brahms and people will listen to us as well. And I thought, you know, it doesn't go far enough, but it also doesn't go quickly enough. It's not decisive enough. So, you know, the ultimate goal in my mind for a group of people like this, even though we might do Brahms or Schumann or whatever, you know, hopefully Clara Schumann, but that's not our end goal. Our end goal is to do stuff that no one has ever heard before, because we've had it in ourselves the entire time. It's a new word, right? And I know Eddie's got like, he's got like tons of this underneath his hat right now. So you better go, because I just need to run around the room a little bit.
Well, I want to come back to the why now, because it is somewhat of a strange situation. We're in the middle of a global pandemic, the kind and the scope of which we've not seen since the Spanish flu in the late 1910s. So let's start with William Blake. O rose, thou art sick. The invisible worm that flies in the night of the howling storm has found out thy bed of crimson joy, and his dark secret love doth thy life destroy. Capitalism is very much a sick rose. The patriarchal white supremacist hegemony is very much a sick rose. From the outside, it looks very attractive, and it's been shored up. And what this sort of thing does is it stress tests those aesthetics. And you see the fault lines. And those fault lines break along the lines of gender, class, race, cisgender versus trans, and the ways in which those imply a power imbalance. So this sort of stress test wakes everybody in the world up to varying degrees based on their true believer status. You know, how much cognitive dissonance are you willing to accept before you start saying, maybe the things that I assume about the world are not actually true? And having everybody experience that at the same time means that they all look at each other and say, so why are we doing this again? Because there's an extent to which the perpetuation of any machine requires consent. You know, if you can imagine a machine where all the gears and cogs are sentient, they have to consent to keep turning. And a majority of the cogs in this particular machine are looking around and saying, maybe what the machine was constructed for is not what we want. Maybe we should reconfigure ourselves and create a different machine. And I think that's one of the things where it goes back to your point, where there are these organizations that will only go so far. They seem to believe that simply reordering the cogs in the existing machine is enough to fix it. And at some point, you have to question, what purpose was the machine built for? Because the machine's not going to do anything other than what it was constructed to do. I don't care how many cogs run around and play musical chairs inside it. So once you realize that this is a machine that is designed to turn the bodies, minds, and souls of Black people into fuel, that literally we're the coal that this thing is burning, to borrow one of their other denigrating metaphors for us, then you realize we can't just, there's no way to make this machine a pretty killing machine. Any stress test will reveal it for what it is, a pretty killing machine. So at some point we have to say, yeah, take this apart, build something else. Because you're not going to magically get freedom and equity and justice out of a machine that literally exists to devour you. All you can do is be its most decorated and celebrated piece of goo once you come out the other end of it. So that's one of the reasons why now is such a pertinent question, because yeah, we're all being shaken. And the question now is, what are you going to do with that? Do you want to go back to normalcy so badly that you will ignore the fact that normalcy to a large part depends on your complicity in your own destruction? You know, even if it doesn't outwardly kill you, the way it killed Corinne Gaines and Breonna Taylor, Ayanna Stanley Taylor, Philando Castile, Trayvon Martin, George Floyd. Even if it does not overtly kill you, you'll die slowly.
And it's crazy to look at people trying to resurrect as quickly as they can the previous order of classical music when all of that is going on, right?
Because it represents safety to them. And that's really what it is. It's this assumption that simply what was is okay. And this psychological expectation that things have to be done that way in order to be right. There's the insidious thing about capitalism and about white supremacy is that they order the world in such ways that they build the walls high enough that they shut out the light. You don't get to imagine other ways of being because they spend so much time on the front end convincing you that this is the only system, or if it's not the only system, all the others are so terrible. Just don't even look over there. The others are so terrible. You don't want to do that. And capitalism doubles down on that by not giving you the time or the energy to do that. The 40-hour work week that you need 2 days to recover from, you don't have time to dream the dreams that are necessary for that. And when capitalism has created a situation where you may not have the luxury of working only one of those 40-hour-a-week jobs, you now have to work multiple ones just in order to survive. Capitalism wants you to be exhausted. It wants you to be too busy being both process and product to do anything else, to build the loftier mansions. So that's one of the things that is insidious about capitalism, is this idea of constant work as a virtue, of grind culture. Those are all traps set by capitalism to benefit the people at the top. Because I assure you, they're not working 80 hours a week.
No, they don't work.
They're buying their third beach house.
Yeah.
And here you are aligned with the people who have no interest in you other than as something that will work itself to death under the false pretense that it will one day reach the land of milk and honey. Like, they don't care about you other than a prop for their illusion.
If you work hard, you too could get to where I am. And it's not.
And it's like, let's not be twisted about this. That wasn't hard work. You put your foot on several million people's necks to get there.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, if I'd still been hustling like I was hustling pre-pandemic, I wouldn't have had time to think about any ensemble, anything, or write anything close to like the stuff that I'm writing for all of y'all, right? That was partly because y'all are capable, but also partly because I had finally washed up on the shores of an enforced rest. Because like, it's hard for me to remember what it was like pre-pandemic sometimes, but I remember the February before all of these started, February 2020, was my busiest February since I'd started keeping records, which has been about 10 years in my career. I was at home in New York for maybe a week and a half out of that month total. And by the time I washed up on the banks of my apartment in March, before quarantine hit, before the pandemic alarm started going, I was already sick. So I slept for like the first 2-3 weeks of quarantine because I was just done. Like, I didn't sing, I didn't play, I was exhausted. I'd had some flu-like thing. I don't know if it was the Rona, who knows? I'd had something going on for a month already, and I've been grinding. And for what? So that after all of that stuff had been done, all of the venues and schools and academic institutions that had me give concerts and workshops and masterclasses for the month of February, which is obviously the only month in which we exist.
Right.
And for the first week in March, so that they could say, oh, we had our Black person this year, and then go back to ignoring all of the names some of the names that we've talked about already for the rest of the year. And I thought, there's got to be a way to leave stronger footprints in this sand. And it's not going to be done by me chasing a check here or a check there or a check here. It's going to be done by rooting myself in the community that we have. Because what we do for ourselves lasts. What we do for white folk when they want a professional Black person is forgotten. Right? Like,
until next Black History Month.
This whole thing of basically going back to the why now, like why rock the boat, it's just a thing of you have to do it, right? There's never a right time to demand the justice for those that have been oppressed. It's never convenient for the oppressors, right? And I think that when we're talking about trying to make a change, specifically within the music world that we all are in or have taken part of, we have to use that voice that we no pun intended there. We have to use that voice to make sure that we are demanding the things that are basically given to us by just being born, those rights, right? You should not have to beg to be treated equally. But since we are here now, right? Since we are here now, we have to use our talents to express the things that have happened to us, those that we know, our loved ones, our ancestors. People are now seeing this as a perversion of art form that has been their kind of their refuge of, I don't have to think about all these horrible things that are going to the world. I'm just going to the opera. I'm just going to go see a play. I'm just going to a movie. Why do they have to bring all of this into it when all I'm trying to do is relax and enjoy myself? And we're like, never had that happen. Explain to me how that goes, just being able to forget about it, like there's just the why now is done is the time for being straight respectful, right? I mean, there's always a time to explain and say, this is why this is happening now. There's a time to read people for filth from top to bottom, those that need it, but you have to start somewhere, when apartheid and that whole movement, making sure that was ended, when was it okay, right? When was it necessary? When did the oppressors say, hey, now you can start fighting back against us? Like when do they tell you that? When do you know? When the civil rights movement was starting here in America, when was the right time for these leaders to step up? When the Native Americans were trying to make sure that there are hundreds of treaties that people had signed for them, when they were demanding justice for that. When is it time? And I think the answer is when you feel it, when you have it in your spirit that you have something to say, that is the time that you should speak. And I think that unless people that are oppressors and not the oppressed will not understand that, unless you have something, unless you can directly relate to that struggle. So that's what I have to say.
Yes.
I'd actually like to pivot the conversation a little bit after hearing a couple of things that you and Eddie both had to add. I know that a lot of Zoom conversations are coming out now on how to change the landscape and take charge of the momentum. And one of the things that I do notice that they tend to soft foot the language, right? So I guess that I'd like to ask all of you, and we can start with James, is why are we being so safe in making these changes? And is there, I personally don't think I don't think anyone here will agree that there's a benefit to it, but I guess how do we remove those extra layers of safety? Because even like Sierra was saying, people feel like they're uncomfortable, but these aren't even harsh truths. These aren't even it's not even going to get uncomfortable just yet. Right. So why are we so safe, and how do we change that landscape?
I mean, there are so many different tendrils of this, but the two that jump out at me are there's kind of an internal pull for, especially the Black people that I know personally who are participating in these panels that are very safe. And then there's an external pressure, of course. And the internal one is the one that makes me sad, because that is the pressure of trauma. All of the Black colleagues of mine that I know that have participated in these panels, and whether or not they come to me afterwards and say, that really didn't go the way I was hoping, or whether they say, I'd hoped it would be just as respectable and safe as that, and it turned out exactly as I wanted. But both of those kinds of colleagues, I think, are feeling in the moment on camera with the possibility that someone, but actually someone white with power, the possibility that someone will see them say something deemed to be too revolutionary or too controversial. They feel that particular programming kick in because they have missed out on opportunities in their past because they spoke honestly. And so when it comes time to do it again, the programming kicks in. And they're like, oh, the trauma response kicks in. They're like, oh no, I can't do that. That stove will burn me. It is too hot. There is then again another kind of colleague, and I will not call them friends, but another kind of Black colleague where the external pressure is the thing on their mind, first and foremost. I want to keep a hold of what I already have, and so I don't want to rock the boat. And it pains me to assign a nefarious intent to Black people. Like it really, I don't like doing it. And so I won't in this case. I think that the nefarious intent is probably implied by what I've said. But if it's not nefarious, then it is just fear of losing what you already have. You got 10 pennies and you're worried you're going to lose those 10 pennies instead of getting a full bank account of freedom to say what you want to say. Wow. So either they're scared of losing what they have, or, and probably along with that, they're so used to doing this dance of like, oh, edit all the time, right? Yeah.
I'm gonna take a long pause so you can edit this out later, okay? Harriet Tubman shot niggas, all right? Okay.
Well, yes,
like,
but that's the thing. Like I see so many Black people going into classical music already the type of Negro that Harriet Tubman would have shot. And they are usually, we're not cutting the shit out. And they are usually encouraged to go into classical music because their teachers either think that they are the kind of Negro that Harriet Tubman would have shot, or because they actually are, right? So like, and I can speak to the whole grid on my screen of beautiful Black people, because we were just talking about how people think that because we're respectful or articulate or well-mannered or light-skinned, that we are in fact those kind of Negroes that Harriet Tubman would have shot, and that they can trust us to be entrusted with the golden jewel, gilded jewel of Western culture. Here you go, docile Negro. I will allow you to sample my fruits, my dried up, unseasoned fruits. Like
that idea of safety. It goes back to the stories that we create, the myths that we tell, not only about others but about ourselves. And white supremacy has hijacked that framework of storytelling very, very effectively, and created two related but diametrically opposed stories: the one of white benevolence and white innocence, and the one of constant need for redemption on the part of Black people. Blackness is a sort of secondary original sin in this system. And you're constantly having to prove that you've overcome it. And how do you do that? By doing what my great-grandmother would have called adopting the Gentiles' ways. And that's played against this narrative of white innocence and white benevolence in a way that explicitly states you must play to the benevolence of white people if you wish to benefit under the system. You have to always give them the benefit of the doubt. You must never cast doubt on their good intentions. And you must never accuse them of ill intent, no matter what is happening right in front of you. It's a gaslighting that sort of perpetuates itself and gets you to perpetuate it. It gets you to gaslight yourself into thinking, if I actually name the problem, I become part of the problem. And it's saying, if I speak too loudly, or if I speak with too much passion, then I've become part of the problem. It's tied up in some other myths that Western white supremacist hegemony has perpetuated, like the myth of objectivity. There is no such thing as objectivity when you're a human being, because you are by nature a subject. You're a subjective being having a subjective experience. And given that experience is in some ways completely artificial, like magenta is not a color that exists. Like magenta is not real. Magenta is your mind trying to fill in the things that your optic nerve is taking. And green, there are shades of green that don't exist. And there's evidence that the way that human beings have perceived color has evolved over the years, because why did we call the seas wine dark in the late Bronze Age under Homer? There were certain shades of color that were probably not perceptible to pre-modern human eyes because of the evolutionary stage of the contents of the retina, the rods and the cones, the optic nerves.
I'm sorry.
If you're constructing reality with this little hunk of fat, salt, and water in here, and it's driving this meat machine, and you somehow believe that that has something permanent and eternal to say about the universe, what kind of hubris are you smoking?
Mind blown.
So given that so much of our reality is constructed and consensual, these myths that we tell each other, we have to break out of them. We have to break out of them, and there's no safe way to do that. There is no way to come up and say,
please, Mr. Oppressor, I know we've been dying, but I want to make sure that you're okay with this before I protest. Might I have a little protest as a treat?
and I don't want a little protest as a treat.
I'm going to warn people that he's going to do that voice. I'm going to warn him. It's going to be a long...
I can redo the intro and include like a content warning.
No, I want to surprise them with it.
Children voices scare you. Please be prepared.
It's like the kind of voice
I might lose my baritone card for that voice.
the kind of voice that I feel like the little tiny baby hand in that character in Scary Movie had that arm. Had a voice. You know what I mean? I was like, what?
Y'all are trouble. Y'all are trouble.
God.
Oh my
Back
goodness.
on track, Sierra. Did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Oh my. Yes, I do. I'm taking in, first of all, baby hand over here, but also everything that James and Eddie just said. It's the concept of respectability pride.
Thinking about the hand, aren't you?
Take your time. Let the Lord use
Take
you.
your time. Let her use you. Let her use
Hand.
you.
Okay. I got it. We'll try. Okay. The concept of respectability politics is so ingrained in white supremacy that it just even saying it just like makes me icky, right? Just not having to, making sure that we protest when it's acceptable. Like, you can protest, but make sure that like nobody's uncomfortable. Like, you can't like block traffic, or sitting at the lunch counter when you're not supposed to. Like, that's not acceptable. And boycotting the buses, like, you're just destroying capitalism. It's just hurting you. Like, that's not what you should do when you protest. Like, I feel like all these things are just more ways to oppress people, right? And to be in these rooms with people when you have the opportunity to change the tides and the way that these organizations are running, or the way that hiring practices are done, even outside of the music industry. Having a idea or a mindset of, I'm only going to say this because I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable here. But I mean, if you're guilty, you're guilty, And like I said before, there's a time to read someone from top to bottom, but there's also, correcting somebody when they have misstepped. I feel like that is always appropriate, right? You don't have to like strip them down. I mean, unless, depending on what they do, maybe it's necessary. But if they have misstepped, and in order for them not to do it to you or others around you, then they need to be corrected. And not correcting and not calling BS out when clearly it's BS, I think that we have a responsibility to do so. Or else, because who else is going to tell them? Who else is going to tell them? And they're going to keep going as if nothing's wrong. And just because you wanted to spare their feelings, I feel like that is, we're taking so many steps back when that happens. So that's what I have to say.
Yeah.
Very beautifully put. Thank you. So we are nearing the end of our time. I have a final question for you guys. This one I came up with all on my own. Let's start with James. and then you guys can think about your answer. In an ideal world, what does equity in music look like to you?
Okay, so good. We're going out on a super light question. It's fine.
Oh, right. Go ahead. That's you.
It looks actually almost the opposite of all of the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that are going on right now. We talked earlier about, kind of putting the fresh coat of paint on white supremacy, and that is what is happening. Like it's trying to be done right now. Like this year, organizations that I and other people have called out, have boycotted, have pushed to change, are trying to do the absolute minimum. So for me, it actually looks like white folk taking a step back from almost all, if not all, of what they're trying to do with classical music right now. And that's actually not as radical as it sounds, because they could literally just play the work of, white composers from, like 1600 to 1700. And there would still be plenty for them to do. What I want them to do is take their hands off of trying to do anything that purports to be a new, more diverse reframing of classical music. God forbid they take their hands and put them all over something like Black Life, like Gershwin's, for instance, right? Like, God forbid they put their hands all over something like the Civil Rights Movement. They could literally just stick to a century of the white canon and let us tell our own stories. Because at first I thought, the secret, the magic bean for this particular beanstalk that we want to grow would be for everybody to do Black composers. Everybody. I was younger then, I was less intelligent then. Because what I saw when we started, when certain white colleagues of mine started doing that, was they immediately tried to co-opt it. And I was like, wait, if we cannot trust you to do our composers in your milieu, in your idiom, Black classical composers, just that. If we cannot trust you to do that without taking credit, without acting like you always knew, without acting like you've always been one of the good ones, and you are showing us you've been one of the good ones by doing Florence Price or Undine Smith Moore or Margaret Bonds, et cetera, see, I'm one of the good ones because I do this music. And I'm like, you literally started doing it a month ago. I have gone backwards on my wish to have every single classical musician do the works of Black composers because, ooh, Lord, they ain't ready. So at this point, I really do want to see them say, okay, I want to do some concert where I feature my Black and brown siblings, but especially Black siblings. I'm going to play one piece on this program and then I'm going to get my butt off stage. Really. That's me being generous. I would actually want, them to maybe do one concert each season that's them and leave the rest of it to us. Because the problem is not just when they do Black composers and do them wrong or do them badly or do them slapdash, but also it's because then if they let us do Black composers, they don't all want to hear what we have to say about their white composers. And so, it's basically turned into a game of, an army seeing how slowly it can retreat from lands it is colonized. It's like, I'll give you Black composers who were born after a certain year, but before that, they're early music, so I will still continue to do them. Then I will give you all composers who are dusky of hue, but I will keep all of the white composers. Then I will give you all composers who are swarthy of skin, whose epidermis has been kissed by the night. And I will give you some of these white composers, but I will continue to fight a rear guard, and I will take Bach and Brahms and Beethoven. I will take my favorites to my chest and take them with me forever. And what it ends up being is they just go to ground. They just retreat into their covert and wait until we and all of our activity has died down. And they're like, is it safe? Have the darkies departed the field of battle? May I once again emerge and take back all of the music that is mine? Yes, I may. They need to take a pause. A pause.
What does it look like for equity in music? Oh man, that's a deep question. So I'll have to channel my mother, Dr. Cynthia Rosalinda Jones Hammond.
Yes.
Yeah, I've gotta put in some wisdom from her. Whenever I come to her with a problem or I want to do this thing, she's always like, "You can do it. There's a thing to do. Let's figure it out." Right?
Mm-hmm.
She is always saying, if you're trying to do something different, get rid of the box. Like we've done for how many, 400, 500 years, these composers, we've done them.
Mm-hmm.
We've done them. There's a lot of composers that were writing during those 400 or 500 years that have been forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
Where, and I know it's blasphemous to even say as a classically trained soprano, right? I've done a few things to say maybe we don't have to sing Wagner every season. Maybe we don't have to sing Mozart every season. And it's like people like I hear people like the Dies Irae going in the back, as people like, like someone passes out, like everyone is like, what did she say, right? But if you really want true equity, if you really want there to be this sense of we are going to do this right, you've got to start from a clean slate. And that, I can take that for any section. You can take that idea for politics. You can take that idea for family life. You got to start with a clean slate. And in order for that to happen, you've got to have the people of these organizations, either those organizations die and they go away, even the great ones. We don't have to mention names on that, but you could kind of fill in the blanks there. You have to start with a blank slate and make sure that you build from the ground up. That's not just about the music that you program for the season. That's about who's running the place, down to the janitors, down to the people that are handing out the tickets, down to when shows are done and how shows are done, lighting, makeup. It's not just about the music. And I think if we get to that point of throwing the box away, and maybe you do want to include something from the classical rep, maybe we need to categorize it and say this is from the Western ideas, the Western music. Maybe we need to do that as they do to us, the Black music, the Black composers. Maybe we need to say the Western composers. We're going to have a Western composer, and then we're going to do things from other cultures. And but as you can tell, I am super bright. I'm sure that there has something happened here that wasn't just from Africa, right? Something went on here, okay? That's genetics, right? And maybe there needs to be something, we need to figure out what's going on in South America. There's a lot of Afro-Caribbean people. There's a lot of Afro-Latinx people that we can program. Maybe there's some operas there that we haven't explored. I'd like to see a Native American opera. You know what I'm saying? If we're talking about true equity, we need to make sure that we throw this idea of we have to do it like this. This is how it's always been done. These are the people that we always do. And if we're going to do a Black opera, we're going to do a Black composer, we're going to do Porgy and Bess, but it's okay because it's Gershwin, right? Like we have to get out of that mold and we have to start from the basics. And they also need to make sure that they're putting the right people to program these ideas in the positions to make these decisions. You got to start over. You got to start over. Like when you're baking a cake and the cake looks like it's not coming out, it's just like, stop. The batter is done. You cannot save it. Throw it away. Start from the beginning. Don't cry about it. It's already, you can't do it. Start over, get the butter out the fridge, start over.
Yes.
I love that.
All right, Eddie, would you like to close us out?
You talk about cooking, Eddie. You got to get in there. Come on now.
I love that Sierra gave us that that idea from her. She sounds like a very, very accomplished and creative woman.
Oh, yeah. If I call her right now, she'd give you a whole thing on it. Oh yeah, absolutely. Because
that's where I am as well. I closed out an article in which I tried to articulate a different way of viewing the Western canon, one that views it from outside without accepting the things that it automatically invites us to assume about music. I closed it out with the words from Gotterdämmerung, so werf ich den Brand in Valhallas prangende Burg. So I tossed the torch within Valhalla's glittering walls. And that's literally what has to happen. We have to torch some of these ideas that plague Western thought about classical music, the idea of the great man theory, and using that framework to explore and to explain the evolution of Western music. Nobody's really, to my knowledge, explained or explored the ways in which white supremacy and classical music develop beside one another. They both sort of take shape during the Renaissance, when Europe comes together to think of itself as white and unified against the rest of the world, triggering the age of exploration and all the colonialism that will dominate the 15th to the 21st centuries. Think about that, nearly 600 years of holistic imperialist genocide against 70% of the world, by 30% at the most generous estimate of its inhabitants. That less than a third of the world has declared war culturally, epistemologically, financially, spiritually, in pretty much all dimensions against the rest of the world, and has imposed its will. The music had to have developed with some idea of that, and we see it in the hegemony of things like tonality and the ways in which modal harmony, which was much more gentle and had much more, there was much more room for you to arrive at the same conclusion very many different ways, is subsumed into this very strict hierarchical system of tonality where 1 is supreme and 5 exists only to set up 1. It's this open shut teleology of everything has to be this way. Western music literally evolves the way that white supremacy does, into this is a system where I'm not going to let you imagine things being any other way, and you imagining things being any other way is going to be seen as a threat to the system, which is why atonality is so badly received, which is why musics other than Western music that don't subscribe to that hegemonic theory of tonality and to some of their hegemonic ideas about form, those are treated as auxiliary or primitive because they don't hew to that pattern. So I really want to question everything by re-educating people so that they don't automatically think, oh, opera is the apotheosis of music and drama together. Is it? Is Western opera really the be all and end all? Is that the acme of human accomplishment in these areas? Or is it that this is the highest incarnation of that particular welding of music and drama that our culture can imagine? Are there other ways of doing it? What about the traditions of the griot in West Africa?
Church service is one of those apotheoses.
Right, the Black church service as a welding of music and drama, the Black sermon as a welding of music and drama, and First Nation people's ceremonies like the ghost dance. You know, there are all these different ways in which music and drama and music and the word have been forged into a single item in different traditions that are held up as the highest in those traditions. And we can see what that says about that culture. The way in which the griot tradition elevates that to its highest point in West African culture, the way in which Karnataka Sangita and the classical music of Hindustani India as well as Southern India, the way that they elevate that, the way that the work of Muslim and Middle Eastern artists like Kulthum elevates the Arab song, which can last for hours, a single song. Like Kulthum could sing Inta Umri for 90 minutes.
Wagner who?
And just, there are so many different ways of elevating music and language in tandem to their highest form within cultures, and it's culturally specific, that we haven't even explored because we keep chasing this Western ideal that we've been sold. What does it mean to remove that from the center of our consciousness and examine it under the same lens that we examine all these other world musics? That's what the system doesn't want, because it levels the playing field in a way ideologically that then everything else has to fall into place. Once you've leveled the field up here, then the rest of it, your programming starts to take shape along those lines. And you see Bach and Brahms, but you don't see them nearly as often. And you see them on the same par as the great writers of Karnataka Sangita, as the great writers of Tajweed, you know.
You have to have the idea that music did not start when these classical composers were writing. That's not where music was invented.
Yes.
And it's been around since the beginning of time, and it's been in all cultures, and it just did not start there. And
people weren't just drumming on buckets before that.
Exactly.
Please go ahead. You sparked something in my mind with what you were saying. What were you going to say, Eddie?
It just blows my mind that people still continue to be surprised by the richness and the intricacy of non-Western traditions, or of traditions that are not white supremacist. Like when I explain to people that there's a logic to singing a gospel run, and I'll say, don't land on that note. And they're like, what do you mean? You can do whatever you want. No, you can't. Well, you can, but we're going to laugh at you.
It's like AVE.
Yeah. There's a chord under you, and it requires there are a certain set of pitches that work with it and a certain set that don't. So yeah, you have to have all that stuff in your head at once. And it's really about context. It helps you. Improvising in jazz, improvising in gospel, improvising in any genre helps you realize that context is paramount, and that you can't just say, oh, well, this is this. No, there's nuance, and it's context based.
Have you all seen? Can I have Sierra be my motivational speaker for everything I do ever in life?
Right?
I mean, I don't know how I'm gonna sit on the couch and watch The Mandalorian after this. Damn. Okay.
Thank you so much for closing us out with all of that wisdom.
Yes.
Thank you guys for having this call. It was very enjoyable, and I'm looking forward to our next Ring Shout project.
Thank you.
Good job leading us.
Set in the days when
We have come
for the sun to rot, for the trees to drop. Here is a strange and
out from the gloomy past we stand at last, where the white
wish I could give
of a red star is cast. I wish I